impact on the talks was disastrous. As a North Korean delegate, Kim Ha-kim recalls.
그러나 미 제국주의자들은 소위 자유송환이라는
We never thought that the talks over this matter would block the negotiations. However, the US imperialists maneuvered to hand the prisoners over to Syngman Rhee and Chiang Kai-shek under the pretext of voluntary repatriation. That is why it took so long.
걸리지 않으면 안 되게 되었던 것입니다.
The principle of voluntary POW repatriation became the foundation of the West's public stance.
How could any of us belong to the free and civilized world and turn thousands of men who have denounced communism to the wrath and murderous fury of the enemy? To do so would undo all of the principles for which we have been fighting in Korea. No longer would the helpless countries of the world regard us as the protectors of the weak. Our promises would be meaningless.
As moral issues increasingly became the subject of international debate and propaganda, the communist side introduced an explosive ingredient. North Korea and China announced that America was dropping infected insects on both their territories. The US government vehemently denied the accusation. The Hungarian journalist Tibor Mere was taken to see the evidence.
When I looked, I still saw flies who were alive, and they moved. They didn't fly, but they moved on the snow. The village people told me that before they found these flies, during the night, American planes flew over the village, and they didn't drop any bombs as they used to do. They didn't even understand why these planes flew there. They understood only next day when they found the flies.
The communists said that widespread germ attacks had occurred, particularly on population centers far behind the front line. Many diseases were identified, including plague, anthrax, and cholera. Some who saw the evidence were convinced.
But germ warfare was carried out. There is no doubt, nothing that ever shake me on that. Germ warfare was carried out, perhaps not on a very large, at the least a very large experimental scale.
Like all effective propaganda, the communist charges rested on a plausible foundation. Recently declassified American documents reveal that a year earlier, the US Army had decided to develop biological weapons and to test them in the field, though nowhere is it suggested that such tests occurred in Korea. The communists certainly took the threat seriously. A huge public health campaign was launched in China and North Korea to vaccinate the population and to improve standards of hygiene. The germ warfare issue was also used to strengthen solidarity and heighten anti-American sentiment. The charges were easy to raise but difficult to disprove. Germ warfare became a divisive international issue with protests not only in the communist bloc, but also in some Western capitals. A commission of sympathetic scientists from 6 countries was invited to China and North Korea. They met Kim Il-sung and examined evidence previously compiled by leading Chinese experts.
A laboratory assistant extracts a spider with a pair of sterilized forceps and grinds it in a sterile mortar and streaks it on an agar plate. The next morning, the assistant takes the agar plate out of the incubator and, under supervision of a specialist, she examines the appearance of the bacterial cultures that have grown on its surface. They have the characteristic form of colonies of the anthrax bacillus.
A wolf spider infected with anthrax sounds deadly, but is it?
Wolf spiders do not bite. So the only way by which wolf spiders might have spread any infection, let's take as an example again anthrax, is, if you like, that the spider was dusted with bacilli and spores of anthrax. Even if this were possible, then the only way the infection could be transmitted would be to the skin. And we know that skin ulcers caused by anthrax are not usually fatal. And also, of course, the infection would not be readily transmitted to another potential victim. So I think we can dismiss the wolf spider from this discussion completely.
Among the most impressive exhibits seen by the Commission were 4 captured American airmen who openly confessed to carrying out germ attacks.
When my son asked me what I did in Korea, how can I tell him that I came over here and dropped germ bombs on people, destroying and bringing death and destruction? How can I go back and face my family? In a civilized world, how can I tell them these things, that I am a criminal in the eyes of humanity?
A few foreign journalists were also permitted to interview the flyers. The French poet and writer Claude Roy, here on the left, was able to talk to one of them, Kenneth Enoch, with some freedom.
L'autre, qui s'appelait Enoch.
The other one, whose name was Enoch, was more withdrawn, but he also told us how he dropped germ bombs and that it was very bad.
Des engins bactériologiques et que c'était très mal.
A moment later, I was in the toilet, having a pee, and Enoch was next to me. And he said, "None of that's true, you know." I said, "Why tell it then?"
Pourquoi vous le racontez? I want to come back home.
He told us that these bombs were already loaded and checked for us. That after we had dropped them, we were to get rid of the rest of our load as quickly as possible and return immediately to base.
Enoch and the other flyers on show all signed detailed confessions. These statements were often extracted after intense pressure, as one American pilot who did not succumb describes.
The first session was the worst. It ran for 82 days. The interrogation was conducted right off the bat by 2 teams of 3 men apiece. And I was interrogated both day and night for the first 37 days.
Exploitable prisoners, like pilots and journalists, were singled out for special treatment.
Brainwashing is a question of overloading your emotional circuits to the point where the stress is so big that your fuses blow, speaking metaphorically. They can then rearrange your thinking. And for so long as the pressure is kept on, the thinking stays rearranged. Once the pressure is off, you revert to your former self.
I did sign a confession relating to germ warfare, but the statements contained in this confession were false. They were obtained under duress from the Chinese communists. And by making these statements, I deliberately attempted to put in as much as was false and ridiculous as I could possibly get away with.
As for the scientific findings, the International Commission concluded the evidence supported the communist case, but the Commission was obliged to rely on materials provided by the Chinese.
Once I was told that during the night, the village where this hospital was attacked by germ warfare. The peasants found flies or fleas on the snow. And one of the Hungarian doctors told me, You see, I spoke with one of